My sister and my brother-in-law gave me their old Keurig coffee machine because they had upgraded to a better coffee machine. I'm bringing this up because I'm so wired right now. Normally I have 1 cup of like watered down, not very energizing coffee every morning from a communal pot of coffee, but now I have access to make coffee whenever the hell I want. And I'm feeling this review in my bones right now. Just caffeine and excitement. Let's get started. Hi guys, my name is Lacey of Spinkles and Fat Hips, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Sometimes to mentally prepare myself for say my intro, I'll think of my like little intro music before I say my intro. Is that dorky of me? I don't know, it helps me. Today, I'm going to be reviewing, in my typical cluster palette review style, I'm going to be reviewing some Morphe palettes for you today. This was highly requested. Normally I do these kinds of videos mostly for indie brands, but I had shown in a past video the new Morphe palettes that I had gotten my hands on recently, and overwhelmingly you guys were like, you gotta talk about these palettes in a video and you gotta review them, so I am to please. Specifically, the request was for me to review this, the new Morphe 35M palette. I'm also going to be including reviews for these two palettes, the 15S and T. However, in a shocking turn of events, I will also be reviewing the James Charles x Morphe collab palette for you today as well. I normally prepare you guys with my reviews by showing you on my Instagram what I'm purchasing, and that way I can gauge the public reaction to them and whether or not they deserve a whole video. I didn't tell any of you guys. I told you guys that I was interested in the James palette. I didn't tell you guys that I had actually bought it, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. So just like any other cluster review, I always say this, sometimes my thoughts for any given palette aren't like enough for enough substance, I should say, for its own dedicated video. So I like to do palette reviews in clusters for that reason. I always try to theme them in some way, so whether it's a certain color scheme, new releases, I have recently just done a bunch of fall reviews, now we're doing Morphe. Something I want to start saying in these videos, because I think it's important to understand that everybody has different preferences in eyeshadow and different techniques that they use. I always use concealer on my under eyes, and I will drag a little bit of concealer up to the tops of my eyes just to even out any discoloration. And usually I will also use the Too Faced Shadow Insurance Eyeshadow Primer set with translucent powder. That is how I use all of my eyeshadows. I say usually because I'm actually not wearing the Too Faced primer today because I had to rush to get to work this morning. This is the makeup I wore to work today, if anyone was wondering. But that is usually how I set my makeup. That is how I gauge all of my opinions. Also, clearly I'm the color of paper. So that's what I'm working with. Use what I do as a guide for what's going to work best for you. I should also say I don't really have like overly oily or dry eyelids. They're just kind of normal. And I don't really have overly watery eyes either. Those are things I get asked sometimes. So that, if this gets annoying, sorry, but I'm gonna start saying this in every cluster eyeshadow palette review video moving forward because everybody is different. I feel it's important to say that. I'm gonna start off my review by talking about these new 15 pan palettes because I bought all of these, I should say, on a whim going into Ulta. Not at the same time, but separate Ulta trips. Because most Morphe palettes don't tend to intrigue me, but these ones I happened to be in an Ulta store and I saw them and they caught my attention. These 15 pan palettes I thought were part of the holiday collection. I think they're part of the holiday collection, but I think there's another palette that's part of the holiday collection as well. It's like a tiny or 9 pan one. I didn't get that one because they look too much like these, and then these look too much like the 35 pan. I don't know. Anyway. I should just say for the record, the outside casing of these feels a lot nicer than past Morphe palettes that I've had. They're like a nice hard plastic. They're black like all Morphe palettes, and they have, excuse the fingerprints, the new Morphe logo in white, and it just looks a little bit nicer, like I've said, than past Morphe products that I've tried. The 35S the 35S looks like this. It is a pinky purpley blue palette, which is enough browns in my opinion for anyone who's maybe afraid of these colors to be able to make this more user friendly. Did I say 35 pan before? 15, the 15S. Anyway, The 15T looks like this. It is a greenish red palette, which is very interesting to me. I wouldn't think for Morphe to pair these kinds of tones together, but I really like this palette. However, this palette does have a lot of browns. I'm gonna have to kind of hold these a little bit lower so I could talk about them without blinding you guys with the mirror. I'm like looking at myself in the viewfinder to see if that's okay. Oh god. So hopefully this works for you guys. I really like this blue palette. The 15S is the blue palette. I gotta keep these straight. So often you guys ask me for a purpley toned palette. I know you guys, I haven't brought my palette series back in a while. I need to do that soon, and the #1 request I get for that is a purple series. I will do a purple series soon, I promise. If you're a purple lover, if you're a jewel tone lover, because I think the blues, the greens, and the purples are so beautifully jewel toned in this palette, I think you'll really like this palette. I actually really appreciate this peach here because I know you don't always need a transition shade, but I do think this is a really nice transition for a lot of these colors to add that little bit of warmth to a jewel tone. Makes it pop very nicely. You also have an exceptionally nice pink and like one brown. So if you're really like hurting, you're like, how do I do my makeup without a brown? Like you have it. This palette is 7 mattes to 8 shimmers, which I appreciate that ratio. I would like maybe a few more mattes than shimmers, but I think these are such beautiful colors that I don't personally mind. I think you're getting a good amount of each. However, in this palette, you're getting 8 mattes, 6 metallics, and then one kind of matte with glitter shade that I still to this day don't know why brands include in their palettes. This one, you could argue, is a pop palette because it is mostly cool tone browns with the addition of these really pretty greens and these really stunning oranges. I think the combination of greens with oranges is pretty daring for Morphe, like I referenced earlier. I don't think a lot of people, unless you're more comfortable pairing colors, would think to do this, so I'm glad that this exists in like a drugstore option for people to like visually see and grasp and like try to use on their own. My thoughts on both these palettes are pretty much the same for both. I really like Morphe mattes. I feel like it's a popular opinion to hate Morphe, and I definitely think some of their very early on, more private labeled palettes weren't the greatest, but I don't mind these palettes at all. I think with the mattes especially, they're very easy to use and very like user friendly, very beginner friendly, very expert friendly. I think you can build color with Morphe shadows, mattes specifically, very easily. They're a nice dry formula. They can be built up to a color intensity. They sheer out the way that you need them to sheer out. I just think that overall they're nice. Again, I'm trying to hold these in a way that doesn't blind you guys. Interestingly enough though, I do not like, this is intense, I don't really like the metallic formula in these palettes, and that's weird for me because like I've also referenced earlier, I tend to like Morphe metallics. The reason why it's not that I don't like these, but I just don't like these as much as I like past Morphe palettes, and that is because, and put one of these down, I find these metallics to be much drier than past Morphe metallics. Normally, Morphe, shimmers, foils, whatever you want to call them, have that very slick dimethicone feel. These have that to an extent, but they act a little weird. They get a little crumbly in the pan, they get a little bit of hard pan, and they don't pick up as nicely or as smoothly. Some of them do and some of them don't. Like for instance, this one just touching the pan feels nice and how I would typically want a Morphe metallic to feel. This one feels dry as heck. They look super nice applied though, but I also kind of think you can see what I'm talking about. The one that I referenced as feeling dry looks not as metallic as the one that I felt more dimethicone, so I feel like there is a quality and consistency within the metallics. Normally with the Morphe metallic, you can use a finger to apply it to the eyelid, you can foil them very easily. With the ones in these 15 pan palettes specifically, I'm going to recommend that you use them over a glitter glue if you're not going to wet your brush first, and only because they're drier, so there's going to be more fallout. I always also bake underneath my eyes because I'm not someone who does my eye makeup first, so that way it can catch any of the crumbliness, but just like work cautiously with these metallics. Like I said, I just find them to be different than other Morphe metallics. Overall though, these are both, this one's backwards, overall though, these are both very pretty palettes. I really like them a lot. I also should say, I find them really nice for getting ready for work because I feel like I can put an eye look together very quickly. And I'm wearing Morphe shadows today, and I didn't put my eye primer on like I normally do because I was trying to get out the door faster, and they blend just as nicely without a primer. So I will give the credit to Morphe for that as well. This is the one that everybody was like, I want to hear your thoughts. And this doesn't have a mirror, so I can play with it nicer. This is the new Morphe 35M palette. I believe that stands for Boss Mood. Who cares? This is like the Halloween-y palette of my actual dreams. I wasn't going to buy this palette until so many of you guys told me to just go in store and see it, which I referenced in my subscribers made me buy it video. I like this palette because the browns are reserved to just like these 6 shades right here because these are very green. That's unusual for Morphe. Most Morphe palettes, especially in the 35 setting, are like 99% variations of brown and then like 5 interesting colors. I love this palette. I think this is my favorite Morphe palette that I've ever touched, just period. It's definitely my favorite 35 pan palette. And this is the kind of formula that I talk about when I reference liking the Morphe formula. The mattes are nice and buildable like I referenced in those 15 pan palettes. I can get really good pigmentation with this orange and these greens, which are the most vibrant colors in the palette. They build up very nicely. So it's not going to be like a crazy pressed pigment, but you can get it to really good pigmentation. These metallics are the ones that I love. These are the ones that just swatch like a dream, that foil on your eyes very easily, that just look so shiny and impressive. Every time I wear this palette, people are always like, ooh, what is that? I literally just ran into Ulta a couple hours ago and everybody at Ulta was like, what palette is on your eyes? I'm like, you sell it like right over there. It's a Morphe palette. I'm not saying that to brag, by the way. I just think this is a really nice quality palette. Because this is so large, I can't lie to you and say that I've used every single eyeshadow in this palette. I've mostly been neglecting these reds. While I have used some of these deeper ones, the lighter ones and these browns have gotten the most neglect because I've been reaching straight for these greens and these oranges because I love that everything in this palette has like a slight pukey undertone, a slight like baby vomit undertone. Everything is like an ugly color. I think I've referenced this before. I'm really into ugly colors lately. Even these like brown metallics have a slight green tinge to them and everything just kind of looks gross in the most beautiful way. And I haven't touched this black. I almost never use black eyeshadow unless I'm like desperate to deepen my eyeshadow. I don't know. I am wearing this specific palette today. This is my eye look for the day. I worked this morning, so if my makeup in itself looks crusty, that's why. It's not the palette's fault because it's been hours. But I've definitely used all of the shades that I would expect to be more tricky, and they're not. They all work really nicely. Maybe like this deep olive shade. Maybe this navy blue. But not like, and when I say like, they're more difficult to work with than the lighter colors, but not in a way that I wouldn't expect for any other formula. I really like this. I really, really like this. Good job, Morphe. I'm gonna swatch some mattes from that 35 palette because I just realized that I didn't. They don't swatch the most impressively, but I hope you see that these aren't patchy. They just need to be built up. Like I just did a video on the Jaclyn Hill mattes. These feel completely different to those mattes. And then 2 mattes each from the 15 pan palettes. Same thing. The swatching looks shitty because I suck at swatching. These actually feel so smooth and don't have any of that patchiness or that difficultness like I referenced in the Jaclyn Hill palettes. This bad boy though. Oh my goodness. I even saved the box for dramatic effect in this video. I never save the boxes for anything. But oh man, do I have thoughts about the James Charles palette. This is nasty. I've gotten all kinds of smudges all over it. Ew. Ignoring the smudges, already I like this better than the Jaclyn Hill palette because it's like the nice feeling black palette, so nothing's gonna look gross on it once you use it and it starts to get crazy. I did also keep the insert with all the shade names, but I think eventually I'm probably just gonna get rid of that. And then you have the big ass palette herself. This is the same formula as the 39A palette, which was released last holiday season. I loved the 39A palette. I still love the 39A palette. It's the same kind of format as that palette with the huge pans in the middle and then smaller pans on either side. However, this formula is radically different. And I had people messaging me asking me if I could compare the two formulas. They're not comparable in my opinion. The 39A is very consistent with everything I just said for those other palettes. Buildable, easy to use, user-friendly, I would recommend them to beginners, etc. This palette has a ridiculous learning curve. To be fair, I understand that these are most of these matte shades are pressed pigments. And I did watch James's video explaining this palette, swatching this palette, all drama aside, I'm not going to touch on that. I did watch his video explaining his thought process for making this. I don't know the best way to say this. Everything that James pointed out in that video is every criticism that I have with this palette. So if you haven't watched his palette yet, this is why I have a problem with this palette though. Okay, I'm not here to spill tea. I'm not here to start drama for views. I'm here as a human being that reviews makeup on YouTube. I hate that this palette comes with such a steep learning curve, but I also understand that that was James's intent. So his intent was to make a ridiculously pigmented eyeshadow palette. I will say he achieved that. The pigmentation on some of these colors is absolutely insane. I will say though, he acts like he invented red eyeshadow. He specifically in that video references there not being a true matte on the market. Girl, please. Like, I have a lot of matte shadows. Most of them are from indie brands. Check yourself. But I feel like he was very strategic in his video because a lot of the things that he mentioned as being like specific ways that you need to use this palette, I would fully agree with. So he references using a packing motion with flat brushes for things like the reds and some of these pinks and blues because that's how you're going to get the most color payoff. Not to do windshield wiper motions because it's just going to be patchy. I agree with all of that. I find everything he said in that video to be very consistent for this. That is why I don't like it though. I'm going to be very honest. I don't tend to like palettes that come with such a steep learning curve, and I know I've said it 100 times. I get that his intention, Unleash Your Inner Artist, was to make a palette that would be so pigmented and so beautiful that working artists could grab it, that the makeup lover at home could grab it and just have something crazy good for an affordable price. Personally, if it was for me, I would not have taken that approach if I was going to release a rainbow palette for the mass market. I would have taken the approach of like, I would rather have something that's user-friendly for the person who's going to walk into an Ulta and pick this up off the shelf without having watched my video first. Because that person who walks into an Ulta and grabs this palette without knowing who James Charles is or have watching that video, because it's not like that video comes with this palette, you know what I mean? They're going to be like, what the fuck is this? Every single, I can't reference enough. Like, I have trouble even with the browns, and I don't think I'm a beginner with eyeshadow, and it's not that I can't get these to work, it's just like he explained, you have to use these so specifically. They're temperamental pigments. I found personally for me, not setting my eyeshadow primer, which is something I never do because all of my eyeshadows work beautifully on a set primer, not setting them definitely helped me out more to get a smooth blend. And also, he referenced using a flat brush with packing motions. I just found that using a super dense brush, whether it was flat or not, helped me get the kind of pigment and like easy blendability that I would hope for, but they're still just so tricky. I wish that this middle row was a little bit different. I wish that I get that his idea was that this could be your go-to smoky eye middle row. You don't need any other palette. I kind of wish he included more of these amazing bright colors that we don't tend to get, because he admitted we don't tend to get a lot of these colors on the market. If he would have put one of these reds in a big pan, this blue in a big pan, this pink in a big pan, life-changing. And I do find most of the metallics to be what I would expect from a Morphe shadow. This blue, I went crazy for this blue when I first got the palette. Oh my god. They're all extremely beautiful. One of my swatches came out like crap. That was my fault, not the palette's fault. They're very pretty, consistent Morphe quality for the metallics. This pink topper shade that he referenced, I find to look best over this black matte. I've gotten compliments using it that way. And then these pressed pigments, which if you don't know, there's been some drama about the pigments. Pressed pigments are not technically legally eye safe in the US. There is a warning on the box itself. to not use these on the eyes. They do cause staining. They stain my skin. I'm paper. Most pigmented shadows can stain my skin. I don't mind. I haven't had any adverse reactions to it. Some people can. If you're very sensitive to dyes, because there's very intense dyes in this palette, use cautiously. The pigmentation is really impressive though. I think, like I said, his goal was to make a pigmented, colorful palette. He did that. Like, he did that. He achieved his goal. This isn't me hating James, because I really don't have strong opinions on James. Either way, as you can see, they stained my fingers. I'm being real about the staining. I just, like I said, I don't find this to be user-friendly. I think if you find that you are not comfortable using pigments, for a second I thought this was upside down. If you find that you're not comfortable using pigments, that you're not someone who likes to change up your routine to get an eyeshadow palette to work, that you want just a beginner-friendly and colorful palette, I can't recommend this to you. I would be doing you an injustice, a disservice, and an injustice. I think if you are like, I'll figure out how to make them work in any way I need to, I just want that pigment, go for it. You're gonna love this. I could take or leave this part, to be perfectly honest. I really just bought this palette for this. But yeah, like I said, like, I don't know, it's just my own stubbornness. I feel like I have a room full of rainbow palettes that I could get to work and have beautiful pigmentation with that don't require this much work. However, if you don't have access to some of the indie brands that I've purchased from, if you don't like buying from brands overseas, if you want to just walk into an Ulta and grab a rainbow palette, use cautiously. That's all I'm going to say. Because like I said, I don't think he said anything wrong. I think he described exactly how to use this palette perfectly. I think he described the flaws in it directly. I don't think he lied about anything. I think he could have been more clear about what pigments are, but that's another story. Just, I don't know. Like I said, I just find that they're easier to use rainbow palettes than all. And that's where my point of view comes from, is that I recognize that you guys are going to be purchasing things based on what I recommend. So often I get asked, what is the best rainbow palette on the market? If you're new to colorful shadows, this is going to scare you. This isn't going to make you want to unleash your inner artist. This is going to make you frustrated. I don't want to make you frustrated. I want you to experiment with color. Not a bad palette, just a difficult palette. I'm just going to be beating a dead horse at this point. Those are my final thoughts. And with that, that is my review of some of the more recent releases from Morphe. I understand that so many of you guys really effing hate Morphe. You hate the ethics behind the brand. You hate their morals. I get it. I get that they're a shady brand. I get why so many people hate them. But I do find most of their shadows to be really good for the price. That's the caveat. It's not like they're blowing my Viseart shadows out of the water. But for the price, and then now the accessibility, because they are in Ulta stores, I find them to be really nice and mostly user-friendly and mostly beginner-friendly. Have you guys picked up any Morphe palettes recently? What are your thoughts on all of these palettes? Please, no shade to James Charles. Don't come for me. I'm just trying to honestly review my experiences with makeup, because I have used the ever-living fuck out of that palette, and out of all of the Morphe palettes, that's the one that I feel like I have the clearest opinion on, because I've used it to death. It is interesting to work with. That's the best way to put it. If you like this video, if you like palettes, if you like these kind of group reviews, and if you like me, please like and subscribe. It means so much to me. Talk to me down below about your thoughts on these releases and anything else you would like me to review in the future. You can also follow me on my Instagram, which is also Spooky Lips and Fat Hips, to see what makeup I'm purchasing, what I'm planning to review soon, etc. And you can also check out my Patreon, which has exclusive spooky content on it. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys!